So welcome to the final video in the series. In this video, we're going to go ahead and get all the acrylics and graphic panel, all that stuff assembled on the machine and get the entire CPA installed on the front end of an IMSAI 8080 chassis. So let's jump in and get this thing done. So now moving on to the panel assembly. And there's some general instructions here. There's how to stack the plastic and film and paper pieces. Clear acrylic, film mask, backing sheet, red acrylic, the button head screws, and the spacers. We opened this up, and I believe the unboxing, and took a look what we've got here. This is the red filter. I can see on the edges here it's dark, as would be expected. This is the backing sheet. It faces into the system, and the film mask mounts on top of it. And that's what provides the bright white through the clear openings. So this is a section of film. It's got clear openings in black, and of course all the white shows through here. The paper backing, the reflective inner surface to try to keep the red light in. And of course the front piece of acrylic, which is clear. It is, of course, got a protective layer on it. So I'm going to try to sit this stuff out of the way here. That did not work very well. Never have enough room on your bench, just ever. I've got some white. Why has everything got to be in the way here to make this difficult? I've got some white. Good Lord, I cannot make this stuff move out of the way. I've got some white backing paper. I've got this little bit of a paper up here just to sit stuff on, and I've got some bubble wrap. The idea here is to try not to scratch anything. So as you work through the instructions, it talks about the photographic mask and the paper backing, and that they have marks on them because you needed to cut them out to size. So the original film sheet would have been larger than this, and there was indications of where you would cut. It says, use a straight edge and a sharp knife or a pair of scissors, etc. The sheet in the kit here comes pre-sized correctly, but it does not have the screw holes in it opened. I don't know if you can see this. Let me get something white behind. I don't know if you can see like the marking here. There's a little reticle there with a dot in the middle. That needs to be opened up so that the mounting bolt can slide through. So how to do that, and they talk about that here as well. Just kind of says, the 8 holes should be cut out of the mask. That's all they really say. So how to do this, I've looked at many masks that have been installed in machines, and I've seen some really horrible hack jobs. People trying to get the holes opened. I've thought about maybe using like a leather punch up against something soft and hold the punch and see if I can punch the film through. I don't honestly know if that would work. If I can get the screw bag open here, we watched me fumble around with a bag yesterday and not be able to open it. I'm going to pull one of the button head screws out. So there are button head screws here, and they do have a little bit of head on them, so there's a little bit of room here to make a mistake. But ultimately, this is the proper screw for the machine. There's a threaded shaft, and there's a smooth section up here. And the smooth section up here is what goes through all of these plastic materials and film materials to hold everything in place. And it's a good fit there. Some replacement screws are threaded all the way up, and that's incorrect. It should have that smooth spot. So my thought at this point, for what I think I'm going to attempt here first, is I'm going to line this up as best I can. I'm going to try to hold it in place. And I think I'm going to attempt to use an X-Acto blade and handle here to make this first cut. This is a brand new set, so the blade should be very sharp. If I can get to come up out. It should be a very sharp blade. I'm going to take off my hoodie here. The idea is I'm gonna get one hole opened up such that I can get one of these bolts to fit through it. Then I think I will use a spacer and maybe a nut to secure that in place, and then align and cut another one. And as I cut these, I will put a bolt in behind each cut just to try to hold things together firmly so I don't run into a lot of misalignment errors. And I thought I had some appropriate nuts sitting here in a bag that I'm looking for off camera. These nuts right here will actually work with those bolts. I'm going to glove up here. I'm going to try to do my best to keep from getting, well, my glove failed almost immediately. I want to try to keep fingerprints and that kind of stuff off. Oh, these gloves are such a battle for me because I've got very large hands. I'm a very tall guy. And these gloves, even though they're large gloves, do not fit me well at all. Dust is always an issue. I can already see dust accumulating on the film sheet. When we start peeling the protective paper and plastics off of the acrylics, it's going to generate static and the dust is going to get attracted worse, and it just becomes a battle here. As I've said in earlier videos, I see every failure. I see everything that isn't aligned well, but the average person doesn't. You know what you've done wrong and you see it. Nobody else typically sees it. So I've attempted to stuff my hands in some nitrile gloves. Be careful if you've never used gloves. Some people have allergies to various materials used in gloves. It can be rather nasty. The camera is actually operating. I think I will go to the glasses where I get better focus. I'm going to cut against the red acrylic sheet because really the entire red acrylic is hidden except for the openings here. And so if I slip and scratch the acrylic over here, we'll never notice. You just won't be able to see it through the layers. I've got the holes laid out in the same order they are here on the sheet. And I guess I'm just going to kind of get this set in place as best I can. Apply some pressure and see if I can cut that out. Well, I was able to pierce it and then the whole thing moved. Let's see if I can use the X-Acto. I just don't know of an easy way to do this. And of course, a viewer out there will have done this kind of thing before and go, oh, you do this, this, and this. And it works fine. And give us the comments. To get my fingers in here a little bit closer. And try to hold things squarer. Like I said, there's a little bit of room. As that has twisted loose, of course it has. Little bit of room for errors, not a lot. I've got it cut 90% of the way out of there. It just doesn't want to finish. There it went. Okay. That seemed to work. There's still a little piece of it attached that I'm going to use a pair of flush cutters just to take that off. And let's see if I've had any luck here. The bolt comes through. Hopefully that hole will drop down over. Not be too difficult to work with. I can see the hole isn't quite big enough. I'm so afraid of scratching this up. I can thread through it, obviously. The hole could have been just a little bitty bit bigger. But what I want to see is when I get down to the bottom of the threads to that smooth area, is will it push through? No, it will not. So I need to do something to enlarge that. And of of course, now I can't get the screw to, there it goes, thread back out. So this is my first time ever attempting this. Trying to think here what I might have. If this was a piece of sheet metal or wood, I'd just use a reamer and ream it out, but it is neither. So I'm going to attempt to cut again, a little more square, a little more firmly. Okay, that looks like it opened up much better. I think it's okay. Boy, this is delicate is the word I'll use here. Thought I'd cut my finger. I didn't. There's a little bit of tab left that I'm just going to remove. I'm going to bring the bolt up through. I'm going to see if I can lower down over that, like so. I'm going to pull out one of these spacers. It'll be one of the longer spacers, since it'll drop over smoothly. Oh, and I didn't open the bag up. Oh, with the gloves on, the bags are much easier to open. Imagine that. I'm going to spin a nut down on there. The idea here is just to create a bit of friction, essentially, through the nylon spacer to the film. I believe the emulsion on the film is on the back side, so I'm not in danger here of damaging it. And I'm going to move on, and I'm going to do the same thing in this corner. I can see shuffling that around that hole lined up really well. At least visually it looks to me like it did. I'm going to attempt the same thing. I wish I had more light. Get my fingers in here close. Be careful here if you slip. Blades are very sharp. I could very easily cut a finger. I'm just now trying to take the little bits that are left behind off and work it around to the full size of the hole. I'm very close. I've got a little bit in here I could still cut out. And yeah, I'm not talking, which you can interpret as for exactly what it means. I am so focused on what I'm doing here, trying to get that nut to start, that I'm not really capable of trying to maintain conversation. Again, this doesn't need to be super tight. But what I want to do is just kind of hold everything in place, and it's doing that. I can see again that alignment looks really good to me. Hopefully I'm not creating a bunch of glare. I'm going to add light. I don't know what that's going to do to the camera. By loosening the nut, I was able to move the film a little bit, get a little bit better alignment into the drill hole in the acrylic. It's an inexpensive X-Acto, and the handle keeps coming loose. I'm actually cutting into the acrylic here a little bit, getting little bits of red. But I'm also trying to cut to get a very well-defined hole there. One more nut and spacer. If I can get a spacer to come out. Boy, that little piece of red acrylic does not want to go away. Looks like I'm getting better at this each time with a bit of practice. See that the alignment on that one to the underlying acrylic looks really good. I don't want to get overly confident here because I will end up cutting myself. I've certainly cut myself more than once with an X-Acto. It's never pleasant. Trying to be careful not to have anything underneath here that could scratch the emulsion on the back of the film. It might become a little more urgent out here. I'm debating in my head whether I need to run bolts through or not in those center sections. I probably don't, honestly. The forehair on the edges should actually work to keep everything positioned and centered. And this way, I won't be tightening. For those center four holes, I won't be tightening anything down on top of them. They'll just be able to float. And that way, anything that might get under them as I cut won't scratch the emulsion on the film. I think we've got a pretty good contact there, and I can see, looking in these other four, they look really nice. They look very well aligned, so I am happy with this process. It's a process for me to use. I am not recommending it. I'm not recommending it. It's really up to you. You need to do whatever you think is right. Because as you saw in the original instructions, you know, cut some holes. That's pretty much all it said. And I think IMSAI knew better than to define an actual process for it, because if that process went bad, then people would try to hold them accountable. That is one of the things in these videos I do. Issue disclaimers at times. I'm doing it right now. Use the process that you think is best for you. If you attempt what I'm doing and it doesn't work, you can't hold me responsible. can see there's a little bit more I want to trim right there. I'm trying to get a nice well-defined edge in the film. Yeah, one of the backing sheet and film sheets we looked at, the holes that the person ended up with must have been, I don't know, a 1/4 inch or larger. It almost looked to me like he used a punch for making holes in paper for a 3-ring punch for the holes he could reach. The openings were massive. And it was just a huge amount of slop, and it looked like he then struggled to get everything kind of square and aligned as he put everything together. And again, I don't know if he was using a pocket knife or I'm sure in the mid-70s, had I been doing this, I probably would not had an X-Acto knife set. Again, that cut really clean. I'm really happy with that. I'm happy I'm wearing the gloves. Yeah, these ones in here are much easier to cut with the sheet being held well in place by the anchors we did on the 4 outer holes. It's not trying to slide around nearly as much as it was. And one left. I don't know if Robert's, I'm assuming he's cut a few of these as he's designed these pieces and had them made. As he lives on the opposite side of the country from me. I've never actually been in his shop or his workspace, and he hasn't in mine. We've only ever met online. I have no idea. And I never asked what he's actually tried or hasn't tried. Again, that cut very nicely. It doesn't look die cut, but boy, it looks awfully close. It's a very nice cut. I'm going to take a bolt. I'm just going to drop it through as a test fit. It should just go directly in with no drama. With no drama. Excellent. Very happy with that. Very happy with that. Let me put the hardware back in its bag before I lose it. And now I need to think about how I'm going to clean this. And it's funny, there's smudges all over it, even though I'm wearing gloves. I can see that I got some bits of plastic under there and created a couple of dimples in the film that weren't there when I started, so that's completely my fault. Got a micro dust cloth here that I'll just use to wipe off as much of this as I can without putting a large amount of pressure down onto it. I think with that wiped off, I'm going to get rid of the bubble wrap I had added just as cushion and to keep me from cutting through into something deeper. And I'm going to, I think, start here So we need to create the stack. Well, I'm going to be stacking. I'm sure this won't show up, but with the screw holes coming up through the clear acrylic, through the film mask, through the paper mask, and through the back red acrylic. And to do this, I'm going to leave the front protective film on. I'm going to try to keep from losing that little pile of hardware. But I will need to remove the inner protective film, which is what I have face up here. And as those who've watched me struggle with these protective films can attest, I have no luck getting these off. It says it's trying to peel. I think I need to peel it all the way off first. Well, being a film sheet here, I think this is peeling easier than paper does, but we'll see if it tears. Got some Scotch tape on it still from transport. I'm going to go ahead and place 4 screws up through. Like I say, the protective layer is still on the outside face there. Sit down in place, spin off the hardware. Hopefully these gloves are paying off and I'm not leaving smudge marks. This must be really exciting to watch. Hopefully everything I'm doing is on camera. Shuffle stuff over a bit. I did just kind of dust over this. Lift off the film sheet. Hopefully there's nothing. I see a little red speckle there. It may be on the other side. It was. The most critical side is the side that'll be facing out, which is this one. I'm going to wipe as much dust off of it as I can before I lay it down on the acrylic. Let's see if we can get this to sit over these bolts and drop down reasonably. That one's obviously being a little bit stubborn. But no, that dropped down and seemed to drop down on well. I cannot complain about that. Try to wipe off dust again. The white on the backing sheet faces towards front, thus the silver goes up as we have it here. set that aside. I'm going to peel the back paper off of this because it'll be facing in, and that way we should end up with the protective paper on only the outside surfaces. That's what always happens with paper. Always, always, always. There's a little bit of Scotch tape on here that held the sandwich together that I'm going to attempt to cut out of the way. Am I doing this right? Yes, it'll go on that way. I'm just going to get it dropped immediately down on. If I can get things to line up. There we go. That brings the full sandwich together. At this point, I'm going to put spacers out here and the bolts again just to keep tension every place that I can. And then I'll figure out how to peel the back paper off here. It'll probably come off in a few steps. See if I can get the paper started back here. Long spacer. I'm using the long spacers here because the printed circuit board will sit up against these long spacers. It's actually being put together in the order that it will be once we get the circuit board mounted on. So with the bolt in place and the long spacer, I shouldn't have to take anything apart. So once this sandwich is closed, I want to keep it closed, keep as much dust out of it as possible. On this side, I'm going to loosen these up now because I've got to be able to get the paper peeled off. I keep it together as a sandwich. Very nice. And of course, by leaving the protective layer there, as we're getting down to all these bits and pieces of plastic and stuff, we're not scratching it up. I think I'm going to actually go ahead. What have I done wrong here? Because I've certainly done something wrong. The other holes aren't lined up, so I've put the red acrylic on upside down. After all of that, I still got it wrong. Yeah. Well, as you know on the channel, all the mistakes get left in. it is what it is. I think I've got to actually flip it over. So I need to pull it up. That's the narrower gap, and flip it over. So before I do that, I'm just going to wipe this inner surface down a bit, just to help eliminate any dust that may have fallen onto it. Hopefully I can pick up just the red acrylic and nothing else. Why is that paper layer so determined to come with it? And it gets flipped over this way. Not the end of the world, obviously. Now all the screw holes actually line up. Sounds like Murphy's wanting something. They probably want to come in. I think I left them outside, or maybe they're in the front room. I don't know anymore. Got cold enough here overnight. We had a freeze. The outdoor dog water dishes were froze. That's the first time I've noticed that this year. If we've had other freezes, I just didn't notice. Now I should be able to the fact that those went in as easy as they do is a good sign that the holes we cut in the film sheet are lining up well. I'm going to get 4 more nuts on here, or 2 more nuts on these, and I'm going to get all these in place. My shoulder's starting to hurt, so I'm going to probably call this video halfway through done and shoot a second video as we continue on with this. Don't work through the pain unless you have to. Plenty of breaks. I did leave the CPA panel itself in the machine running completely overnight. The machine was being exercised. I've had a spacer roll off someplace. Certainly looks like I've had one roll off someplace. We'll shoot. Take breaks, treat yourself well. The harder you work when you're tired, the larger the mistakes you'll make, and the harder it will be to recover. There it is. Final spacer. The nuts I'm using here are not provided in the kit. I just jumped into my junk box some time ago and grabbed some nuts for other work that I happen to knew would be the correct size here for this. So we've got the sandwich together, still got the protective paper on the front. The next step really will be to raise this up, drop the circuit board over. The switches will be down here. And we've of course got this set of spacers we'll talk about when we get to that point. And of course I've got to deal with the protective plastic on the front, but for now I'm going to leave that in place. I'm just going to leave this here as an assembly here on the table, try to keep some of the dust off of it. So our next step here is going to be to stack all of this together. Where are my good glasses? Get this all stacked together and screwed down and move forward with this. So the ribbon cable, I've got that piece of foam back on here. It's shipped with it just to protect the pins while I'm working on things here. And I should be able to bring the panel here. Actually, I'm going to do something before I do this. I've got some blue painter's tape here. I've still got the protective film on the front of the plastic here. I'm going to put some tape over each one of these screws just to keep them from falling out. Blue painter's tape's not supposed to leave any of the sticky residue behind. My experience on acrylic is it still does. So if you're working on the, the unprotected plastic here, your call, whether you want to use it or not. But in this case, I think it'll make it easier for me to put the stack together and not take a chance on screws falling out and those kind of things and just kind of making things nasty. And I am folding over a little tab on each piece just to make it easier to peel off. Say with the protective film in place, I'm not worried about transfer of the whatever the sticky material is off the tape to the plastic. So we've got that all stacked up. This will sit this way. The board will sit down on this way. I can see that once again I've got all kinds of dust there. I'm going to pull the nuts off. I shouldn't need them at this point. I know I don't have any running commentary going on here. The board should, just with a little bit of wiggling, drop right down on. There's been a huge amount of time go into making measurements of all the hole locations and the hole diameters on the plastic panels, the sheet metal it screws into, and the printed circuit board itself. So there's confidence that that's all correct. I'm just going to wipe the dust out of here that's accumulated. There's little white specks everywhere, not that you'd be able to see them. They're hidden off inside, but there's no reason to leave them there. And I should be able to just pick the board up and get started on a couple of screws here. And if I can get it to line up, it should do just exactly that. And you can see that just dropped on there. Fantastic. That's exactly how it should have gone on. There's no twisting. There's no needing to move things around. Everything's extremely well measured. And it just comes together. So the short spacers are these spacers here. They now go on. The spacers we're providing have a thread in them, but it's not the same thread as the screws. It's enough of a thread that you can get a bite and get it to spin down on, but not enough that it'll just grab and hold tight. The idea here is the thread in these will help you mount the panel. It'll keep things from falling apart. But once it's mounted, you'll be able to go ahead and tighten up these mounting screws. If I can get it to go here. And it won't bind up with trying to, tighten everything up. There's just enough thread there to hold these in place. So let's say it's the wrong thread inside of the nylon spacer, but it creates enough interference to help hold things together. So I'm going to get those started down on here. So anybody who's ever attempted this with an original CPA knows the balancing act of keeping the sandwich together, not having everything fall loose. It's just a mess. It's just messy to do. And you end up with spacers falling off, and you got to pull the panel off and try again. And it's just extremely difficult to do. So Robert came up with this idea. I think it's an excellent idea. It certainly makes this go together easier. I'm still going to put the backing nuts on here for now, just to kind of hold everything together. That way I can flip it over and we can take a look. These don't need a lot of torque on them. When we go to mount this, I will back the screws out just so that the tip of the screw is flush or a little bit inside of the spacer. And that way the panel will just plug in to the S100 connector and kind of sit back on, and the screws will line up and it'll just mount up. I've done that portion of this enough times in prototyping to know that works really well. But the key is to back the screws out so they're just inside of the top edge of those spacers. So see, this is my first time doing this with a complete production set here and not used panels and that kind of stuff. And so far, everything's going together exactly as I expected it to. No surprises. That really should get us to this point where we've got all the plastics attached. I'm going to go ahead and move this box out of the way now. I don't need it taking up room here. I don't know how well you can see down in there, but nothing should be touching the red acrylic, and I'm just looking. The couple of capacitors I had worries about, I've already folded over a bit. None of the LEDs are actually touching, but they're very close to the red filter. I don't know how much of a view you're going to get down inside of there on camera. I don't even know if it'll focus. But everything just looks fantastic. That's come together exactly as I would have expected it to. And really at this point, it's going to be plug it in, get the screws caught in, tightened up, and then it'll probably be back a screw out a bit as I peel this white plastic off the protective panel. And we'll go from there. So when I'm back in a second here, we'll be out at the machine trying to mount this guy up. So obviously we're out here at the system. It's got the MPU card and some RAM cards and a PIO card I'm testing, etc. in it. We've got the panel itself here. There's of course this S100 connector that extends out beyond the sheet metal. That's what we need to plug the board into. I'm going to set the panel down here and just remove these nuts we put on temporarily for transport. Now I'm questioning the use of that blue painter's tape because I do need these screws to be backed out enough that they're flush down with the washers. If they poke out this far, it pushes everything out of alignment to a point where it's really difficult to get the line up. I'm going to see if I can just with my fingers. You can't see what I'm doing here. I'm just backing the nylon spacer up a bit so it's flush basically with the tip of the screws. Sorry for the poor camera positioning. The blue painter tape actually is making sense here. As I release these, it's just keeping things from completely falling apart. Yeah, this isn't the best place for camera work. Here I don't actually have a camera mount. So those are backed out. There's still some grip to them. We can see the S100 edge connector here. That's got to plug down into the connector on the machine. I can kind of feel around and feel where it goes, and that's pretty much where it plugs in right there. Did I bring the Allen wrench out with me? I'm sure I did not. I will return with the Allen wrench in just a second. So in the kit, with the little bolts here and the spacers, a little Allen wrench was included. And this is the little wrench that'll engage with these button screws so we can begin to get them torqued in. So right now the panel is just kind of floating here, and height-wise, I don't know how accurate it is. I'm going to stand up and reach over the camera so I can actually see where I'm at, and the assembly needs to be moved up a little bit. There it went. And I saw that first one engage right there. I'm going to come over to the one over here and see if I can get it started. Again, these first two, because the height of things need to be set correctly, take a little bit of finagling. I think that's got it there where it started. Maybe. And maybe not. No, that's turning enough. It's not started. I can see that it's a little, it needs to be raised up a little bit. You can say this is a little bit fiddly to get the first couple started. There it went. Once you get them started, everything just kind of pulls together. And the rest of them, oh, I bumped the camera, apologies. The rest of them should just now engage and turn in. So again, apologies, I'm reaching around the camera. I can feel that that one's catch. There. Well, I'm not having as much luck as I've had the previous several times here. There it went. The measurements here are very precise on this stuff. Yeah, that one caught. But once everything gets into alignment, they should go in relatively easily. That one caught. So with those 4 outside ones in place, these should just pretty much drop right into place and turn in. And those measurements were critical. A huge amount of time went into making those measurements, so that once you got it square here, everything would just turn in. Because ultimately, the CPA board, I don't want to say it floats in the S100 socket, but it's large enough when I put it in. Of course, the board was, the whole assembly was torqued a bit to one side or the other, and that makes it a little bit difficult to deal with. And my hope here now is if I can back these out a bit, hopefully get under that film and get it to start peeling off, maybe without scarring up the acrylic. I probably should have started a corner of this. Of course, I'm wearing the wrong glasses for this. I can't get up under it. All right, there it came. And to begin to peel it off, and good, and it did just what I hoped it would do, and that is it. There's a little bit of Scotch tape there with these screws backed out just a little bit so they're not compressing up against the sheet. It feels like I can just pull the plastic right off like so and just begin to peel here. Tighten these up a little bit. Get rid of that bit of tape. And of course, that did leave a bit of tape residue on the front. Will this one pull around this screw? I need to back these 2 screws out a bit. That way the plastic film isn't compressed up underneath and peels off. Turn him in just a little bit. So you can see, this is not a bad process. Listening to people describe what this was like on the original machine, there's a little bit of... I should have removed this Scotch tape. There it came loose before getting to this point. Once peeled off, that left a little bitty bit of plastic under it. And hopefully I can get to slide out of there. Come on, you. And again, I'm working with the wrong glasses on, which always makes this stuff difficult to do. I'm gonna have to come back around to that. Back these out a bit so the plastic's released. And hopefully the sheet will just pop over it and pop over it. And that one also left a little tiny bit of plastic underneath it. I can see that it's loose. It just doesn't quite want to come out. And that left a little bit of gum off the tape on the acrylic. So I will need to come back around and clean the acrylic up, but now I can just take these. They don't need to be super tight. Trying hard not to slip here and scratch. The acrylic is quality acrylic. It won't scratch super easy, but it will definitely scratch. It's still acrylic. You can see here I'm not fighting these. They're already started. It's just a matter of them drawing everything down under a bit of compression. Well, I think this is the first time, potentially ever, on video where a brand new set of acrylics, the film, a reproduction of the graphics film sheet done as IMSAI did it. Okay, I can't do it with one hand. I'm too unsteady. All this stuff has come together, so that's pulled up tight. I need to take this data cable and plug it into the MPU-A card. I'll need to stand up over the top here to do that. If I can get it to line up. There's not a lot of room to work inside of here where this plugs in. There it went. Tuck the cable out of the way. Hit the power here. And we are up. I should be able to do a reset. I have a controller card in the machine that affects these LEDs and keeps reset from lighting on them up. That's like I said, that's because of a controller card I have in the machine. Should be able to do an examine. We're at address 0. I should be able to come examine every address bit changed up to 1. Examine. Should be able to go to address F8 and examine. I do have a floppy disk emulator installed in the machine. I'm going to mount up a virtual disk over here on the server app in the PC. Let's just do a reset again. Examine. FF00 is the entry point for me to boot CPM. I'm going to do a run. And I have the CPM prompt up over here in the terminal. As I'm hitting keys here, you can see LEDs blinking. I'm going to go ahead and load Microsoft Basic. If I can type it with one hand. And we'll see a whole lot of activity happen here as it's reading the virtual disk and loading up Basic. Remember, it's a 2 megahertz 8080. It is not super fast. I'm going to paste in a little program here. So I've just loaded up Basic. Let me do a copy. I've got the source for the program on the PC here in the text editor. And I'm now sending down the serial cable from the terminal, the source for the Basic program. And it's loading. That's up to line 72. Again, you can see the panel acting as a panel. It's gorgeous. The IMSAI 8080 is so crisp and sharp. Everything's very legible. Everything lines up fantastically well. I'm going to loosen the camera up and reposition here a bit. Sorry for moving during live action. Let's see if it'll sit there. Basic program's loaded. This card up here is an original PIO card, parallel IO card. It's got 4 8-bit parallel output ports and 4 8-bit input ports here, and they're looped back together. Original IMSAI LEDs are sitting here. These are the new LEDs, the same ones that are being used down in the CPA, and I've been playing with resistor values just to look at brightnesses and current draw. And that's why there's a difference in intensity. Original ones that have just, over the years, gotten dimmer and dimmer. New, original, and new. But if I run this basic program now, we should see the LED start to blink. And we do. And what all this program's doing is writing random values out to all 4 ports, and then reading them back in on the 4 ports over here to make sure that what was written is read back. There is a running IMSAI system with a reproduction CPA, printed circuit board, electronics, reproduction switches newly manufactured. There's a reproduction MPU-A card sitting back here the cable's plugged into. In my case, I have reproduction memory, or a memory merchant MM16 K14 RAM cards. There's 3 RAM cards in here holding 2114s that are reproductions. There's an original extender card with an original PIO card. Behind there is a serial card that's providing the serial communications over to my terminal emulator here on my laptop, and behind that is an FDC Plus floppy disk controller. That emulates the Altair floppy disk controller, but it's completely usable in the system here, and for my testing, that's fine. I hate the fact that there's glue off of that little bit of a Scotch tape that was on there. That lifted it off. But you know, the EXP22 backplane down here that everything's plugged into is a reproduction. There's currently a couple of switching power supplies over here loose, providing system power. There's a carrier board that'll have switchers on it that's coming. We're working on it, called the PS-28 or PC-28 PS-28S. So PS for power supply -28S, 28 amp switching power supply. That'll be a board that'll directly sit down into the chassis here and mount like the original power supply did. The other sheet metal components are coming. They're being worked on. We're getting closer and closer to having this being a complete kit. But I'm very pleased. I'm very pleased with how this panel, dropped the camera. Apologies for that. This is a homemade camera mount, and it's not a very good one. Very nice to see the system running here. Since I've got you captive, let's go ahead and stop it running. I'm going to dismount the virtual floppy. I'm going to do a reset. I'm going to go to address 00, and I'm going to do an examine. DB, deposit, my favorite test program, deposit next. D3, deposit next. FF, deposit next. C3, deposit next. 0000, examine to get back to address 0. Run, and we've just entered a little bitty machine language program from the control panel here directly that we're running that is reading the programmed input ports here. It's reading these switches, and it's writing the byte it's reading out to the programmed output. It's the LEDs up there. So there is the CPA in actual just operation. We just jumped in and did it. We can stop the machine. See the bit pattern here. I'm going to single step, and we will see this switch pattern get written up there in a moment. So we have just jumped around to address 0 on the machine. There's the input port. Import command there, opcode. So at address 1, it's going to read from port FF. There's the port FF being put out on the bus. It's reading the switches up to 1, down to 0, up to 1. So it's read the switches. Those will end up in the A register. It's now in the A register of the CPU, the switch pattern. There is an outport command. There's the port to write to. There's it writing to that port, so it's port FF. And there's the bit pattern again being written out. And we should see the LEDs change. And we do. LEDs have changed. The C3 was up there. I just skipped past it to address 0000, and we're back to the beginning of the program. So there is a live CPA panel up and running, working beautifully. I think this really finishes up this part of the build. It's been an honor to be able to build the first fully kitted kit here. It's been really nice to see, especially the acrylics here and that reproduction graphics panel back there that's done on actual film. You know, it's exposed on film the same way IMSAI originally did it. A lot of work. I cannot begin to tell you how much work went into getting that right. and the fonts and everything, and you know, scans of multiple original panels, and just a tremendous amount of work went into getting that looking as crisp and perfect as it does. So I'm going to keep rambling on here, and I don't need to. Anyhow, I think this wraps up the CPA build video. Well, I appreciate your watching the video. If you've watched the entire series, awesome, thank you. Like on the video is nice. Comments, feedback, channel subscription, all those things are always appreciated. So I hope this video series helped you get your IMSAI 8080 CPA Rev 4 panel assembled in your machine and running. With that said, there might be future videos, there might not. If you have suggestions for additional videos, go ahead and add them as comments. I try to read every comment. Anyhow, talk to y'all later.